Well, the most important thing to say is that Russia's war against Ukraine is not going very well, and they are tearing themselves apart. You have these spectacles of a rebellion against the leadership by the preeminent military force in Ukraine at the time, then striking a deal that purportedly puts them at peace, but in fact, Putin goes after and kills the head of that group, shooting a plane out of the skies over Russia, who is himself a Russian warlord. These are all very bad signs for Russia's military effort. We cannot trust anything that the Russians release as fact. They will put out whatever they want to put out, regardless of whatever it is that they find on the ground, who the bodies are, what the black box says. Unclear. He was obviously seriously weakened by Prigozhin's rebellion. This made him look weak in the eyes of the public. And as we noticed, many people in the military and the public agreed with Prigozhin that the military effort was failing, that it was a mistake to go in, the conditions for the soldiers are horrible, and that he was going to Moscow to try to change this. And he was welcomed. He was welcomed by people in Rostov, in Voronezh. He occupied 2 Russian military bases. So this showed just how fragile Putin's grip is. In addition to that, we have what I think is a real psychological factor of him having been isolated during COVID for so long and getting such bad information, and his health and his age, about which we don't know very much other than his biological age, which is in his early 70s, and he's had some issues. Well, that is the whole point behind Putin doing this, and doing it in so demonstrative a way. He is trying to give people that sense of pause and say, okay, you may not like the way things are going, but if you go against me, I have the means to take you out. That's what he's trying to signal and reestablish his own sense of authority. But as you just noted, there are outpourings of sympathy for Prigozhin, having been assassinated in this way, including in St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin's hometown. So it's not so clear how all this shakes out. I also think, as a general rule about looking at things in Russia, think of it as an iceberg. We can see about 10%. About 90% is happening below the surface and we can't see it, and we really don't know what it is. But if this sort of fighting is going on between these individuals in a public way, I think we can be pretty sure there's a whole lot else going on under the surface that we don't see. I think Wagner is over. I think that the Russian state has decided to take it down. What they will try to do is reconstitute another mercenary group under more direct Russian government control. And they still want to have the operations in Africa and the operations in the Middle East. They still want the blood diamonds. They still want to have these irregular forces that they can pay a little better, but have really well-trained people. So they're going to try to reconstitute something else with some of the Wagner personnel, take others into the regular military, maybe make them trainers, but not let something get as out of hand as the Wagner group had become for the Kremlin. We don't know that. We don't know that. They had this deal, this alleged deal between Putin and Prigozhin about him taking the Wagner group to Belarus and having sort of a safe refuge in Belarus. He didn't go public. He didn't show who he was. He didn't show up in Belarus. He shows up mysteriously somehow in St. Petersburg at an Africa summit, but then he disappears again. And it seems like he was being extraordinarily careful about where he was and what he was letting people know about where he was. And there are probably places in Russia and in Ukraine that the Wagner group controls where he felt safer. We simply don't know what happened here. We know he was on the manifest. We don't know whether he was physically on the aircraft or not. He certainly knows now that Putin is intent to kill him. And so he will be careful whether or not he was on that plane. If he survived this somehow, if he wasn't on the plane, I think he's going to be very careful. And just like Putin, he's going to take his next step at a time of his choosing, not just immediately pop up on a video. I think we have to say a word about what this means for Russia's war against Ukraine. Already, before the assassination or the presumed assassination of Prigozhin, the Wagner forces had left the battlefield in Ukraine. They were the last forces to make any territorial gains at all. A Pyrrhic victory in getting the center of Bakhmut that really meant very little. Since then, Russia has not been able to gain any territory at all. The Ukrainians have been advancing slowly through very stiff defenses. And it seems as though Russia is not able to prosecute any offensive goals in Ukraine at all. That situation seems to be accelerating. You have reports of Russian soldiers defecting. You have reports of convicts that the Wagner group had recruited being teed up for assassination and then fleeing their positions as a result. There's a lot of chaos on the Russian side right now, and I think that's going to increase.